a fuel truck leaves a depot. An ammunition vehicle moves toward the front. A small supply convoy takes a route that once looked safe. But above it, something is already watching. Ukraine is now increasing medium-range drone strikes against Russian logistics across the battlefield, from Luhansk and Donetsk to Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea. These are not random explosions. They are part of a growing effort to hit the system that keeps Russia's army moving. Before going deeper, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for more clear analysis on the weapons, battles, and geopolitical shocks shaping today's war. Because if Ukraine can keep striking fuel, ammunition, transport routes, and rear supply points, Russia's biggest problem may not be losing one truck. It may be losing the rhythm of the war itself. So how far can this drone blockade go? And can it slow Russia's next offensive before it even begins? Ukraine is no longer treating Russian logistics as something that sits behind the war. It is turning those roads, depots, and movement routes into part of the battlefield itself. For much of this war, the clearest images came from the front line. Tanks burning near trenches, infantry running through tree lines, FPV drones chasing vehicles across open ground. But the campaign now taking shape is wider than that. Ukraine is trying to stretch pressure from the contact line into the rear areas where Russia moves fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and replacement troops. That shift matters because an army does not fight only where its soldiers stand. It fights through the routes that keep those soldiers supplied. This is where medium-range UAVs become important. They sit between two better-known layers of drone warfare. On one side, FPV drones are close-range hunters. They are fast, cheap, and deadly near trenches, roads, and assault routes close to the front. On the other side, long-range drones are used for deeper strikes against oil facilities, military plants, air bases, and large targets far inside Russian-held or Russian territory. Medium-range UAVs fill the space between those two worlds. They reach into the operational rear, where Russia must move every day but cannot defend every kilometer. That middle layer is now becoming one of Ukraine's most useful tools. It allows Ukrainian forces to search for targets that are not always dramatic, but are extremely important. A truck carrying shells may not look as powerful as a tank. A small fuel vehicle may not look like a battlefield prize. A temporary storage point may not appear in headlines. But if those targets disappear at the wrong time, the effect can move forward through the entire chain. Guns may fire less. Vehicles may wait longer. Assault groups may arrive without enough support. The geography also shows how large this pressure is becoming. In the east, Luhansk and Donetsk remain central to Russia's ground campaign. These areas support attacks, rotations, repair networks, and ammunition flow into several active sectors. Farther south, Zaporizhia and Kherson connect to routes that help sustain Russian forces across occupied territory. Crimea adds another layer because it is both a military hub and a rear base for operations in southern Ukraine. When Ukraine hits across this map, it is not only attacking isolated targets. It is testing the whole system that links Russia's front line to its rear. That is why the reported June 7th operation is important. Kyiv Post reported that Ukraine's unmanned systems forces carried out a multi-direction strike and hit 26 military, energy, and logistics targets in Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Crimea, and Bryansk. The number is not the only issue. The spread of locations is the real signal. Ukraine is showing that its drone campaign can create pressure across several regions at once, instead of forcing Russia to defend only one road or one depot. For Russian commanders, this creates a difficult problem. They can move supplies farther back, but that makes delivery slower. They can split convoys into smaller groups, but that increases the number of trips. They can shift routes, but every new road must be watched, secured, repaired, and protected. None of these choices gives Russia a clean answer, and each one adds friction to daily military work. So the first stage of this campaign is not about one spectacular strike. It is about changing the meaning of the rear area. If Ukraine can keep making Russian logistics move under threat, then the next question becomes much sharper. Where is this pressure already strongest? And why has Luhansk become one of the clearest signs of this new drone war? Luhansk is now becoming one of the clearest examples of how Ukraine is trying to control Russian rear movement with drones. This matters because Luhansk is not just another occupied region on the map. It is a major support area for Russian forces in the east, and it helps connect troops, ammunition, fuel, and repair networks to several active frontline sectors. If Ukraine can place pressure here, the effect does not stay in one town. It can move across the wider Russian military system in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine's Third Army Corps claimed that its forces had established drone-based fire control over several areas in Luhansk, including Luhansk City, Starobilsk, Alkevsk, Bryanka, and Kadivka. These names may sound like separate points, but together they form a deeper support zone behind Russian lines. They are linked to transport routes, storage sites, staging areas, and movement corridors that help Russian units stay active. For Ukraine, the goal is not only to destroy one vehicle or one depot. The larger aim is to make Russia feel watched in places that used to feel far from immediate danger. The distance is the key detail here. Ukrainian drones reached the area of the Izvorin checkpoint, more than 205 kilometers inside Russian-controlled territory. That number changes the meaning of the strike campaign. A drone threat at that range means Ukrainian operators are not only hunting vehicles near trenches or short approach roads. They are reaching into the rear area where Russia plans movement, gathers supplies, and prepares units before they are sent closer to the front. That is a serious shift, because the rear is supposed to give an army space to breathe. For Russian logistics, this creates a pressure that is hard to solve with one answer. A supply truck can avoid one road, but it still has to reach the front. An ammunition depot can move farther back, but then every delivery takes longer. A command post can become more hidden, but it still needs radio links, vehicles, and people moving in and out. Drone fire control does not mean every target is destroyed at once. It means movement becomes risky, slower, and easier to punish when a pattern appears. The targets named in this campaign show how practical the Ukrainian approach is. Armored vehicles, ammunition depots, and rear transport routes are not symbolic targets. They are the working parts of Russia's battlefield machine. If an armored vehicle is hit before it reaches a staging point, one assault group may lose protection. If an ammunition site is struck, artillery units may have to reduce fire or wait for a new delivery. If a route becomes unsafe, commanders must change schedules and accept delays. These small problems can build into a larger operational burden. This is why Luhansk is important beyond the immediate damage report. Russia must now think about defending more than trench lines, assault routes, and artillery positions. It must protect the places where the war is organized before it reaches the front. That means depots, fuel points, road junctions, repair areas, and rotation routes all become part of the defensive problem. The more space Russia must guard, the harder it becomes to keep pressure on Ukraine without weakening another part of the system. Luhansk therefore shows the real danger of Ukraine's medium-range drone campaign. It is not only about range. It is about forcing Russia to treat its rear as exposed ground. Once that happens, every road becomes a question, every convoy becomes a risk, and every delay can reach the soldiers waiting at the front. That same logic is now spreading toward other supply routes, where the battle for movement may become even more decisive. That makes it one of the most sensitive routes for Russian military sustainment in the south. If fuel trucks, repair vehicles, or ammunition carriers are hit along this line, Russia may still have other roads, but every alternative comes with cost. Some routes are longer, some are narrower, some are easier to watch from the air. Others may not support heavy movement at the same pace. The H-20 also matters because it helps connect the eastern theater with the southern corridor. In simple terms, it gives Russia another branch in the same logistics tree. But that is also the weakness. When one branch is hit, pressure can move into the others. A strike near one road junction may force vehicles to shift toward another route. That new route then becomes more crowded, more predictable, and easier to track. Ukraine does not need to destroy the whole network in one day. It only needs to make the system work worse each time Russia tries to use it. This is where drone warfare becomes more than direct destruction. A supply truck may survive by changing direction, but it may arrive late. A fuel convoy may avoid one danger zone, but it may burn more fuel on a longer road. A group of vehicles may split into smaller packets to reduce losses, but that creates more trips and more chances to be detected. For frontline units, these delays are not small details. Artillery may wait for shells. Armored vehicles may remain parked. Infantry may enter an assault with weaker support than planned. For commanders, the pressure is even deeper. Logistics is built on rhythm. Trucks must leave at certain times. Depots must receive supplies before they run low. Rotation schedules must match battlefield needs. When drones threaten the main routes, that rhythm begins to break. Russia may still move men and equipment, but it has to spend more time, fuel, security, and planning to do the same job. That is the real purpose of turning roads into risk corridors. Ukraine does not have to close every highway completely. It only has to make each movement slower, more expensive, and more exposed. Once that happens, the damage is no longer measured only by vehicles destroyed on camera. It is measured by pressure building inside the Russian logistics system, and that pressure is already forcing Moscow to change how it protects the rear. The pressure on Russia's rear network is now visible through the way Russian transport behavior is changing. This does not mean Moscow's supply system has collapsed. That would be too simple. But when an army starts changing roads, limiting movement, hiding military vehicles, and reshaping normal traffic patterns, it usually means the rear area is no longer working in a normal way. Reports say Russian-backed authorities in Luhansk issued an order banning commercial passenger transport on part of the M04 route running through the region. On paper, that may look like a civilian traffic decision. In war, it carries a deeper meaning. If a road becomes dangerous enough to restrict movement, then commanders are no longer thinking only about moving supplies. They are also trying to reduce confusion, clear space, and protect routes that may now be watched from above. This is the kind of adaptation that reveals pressure without needing a dramatic announcement. Armies rarely admit that their supply lines are under serious strain. Instead, they change habits. They move at different hours. They avoid familiar paths. They reduce large convoys. They send vehicles through local roads. They try to make military transport look less obvious. Each move may help in the short term, but it also shows that the old pattern has become too risky. The reported change around the Mariupol to Berdyansk route fits that pattern. Russian forces are said to be using local roads closer to the coast instead of relying on the main M14 route in the same way. That may help them avoid some known drone threat areas, but it also creates new problems. Smaller roads are often slower. They can be harder to repair. They may not handle heavy traffic as well. And once a new route becomes regular, Ukrainian reconnaissance can begin building a fresh target map. The camouflage effort tells the same story. Russian vehicles have reportedly been painted white, and military trucks have been covered or adjusted to look more like civilian transport. That is not just about hiding from human eyes. It is about confusing drone operators, slowing target confirmation, and creating doubt before a strike decision is made. But camouflage is not a shield. If a vehicle follows military timing, moves in a military pattern, or enters a known supply area, it can still stand out. These changes create real effects at the front. A rotation may take longer because troops cannot move along the fastest route. Fuel may arrive later because tankers must travel farther or wait for safer windows. Ammunition can be delayed because storage points and delivery plans keep shifting. Small assault groups may still be sent forward, but they need food, shells, spare parts, batteries, vehicles, and evacuation options behind them. If those support layers slow down, the attack loses strength before it reaches Ukrainian positions. The danger for Russia is not one sudden failure. It is the buildup of friction. Every reroute adds time. Every smaller convoy needs more drivers and more planning. Every painted truck still needs fuel. Every restricted road forces someone to decide who moves first and who waits. That kind of pressure does not look like a frontline breakthrough, but it can quietly weaken the pace of combat. So the Russian supply system is still operating, but it is being forced to work under stress. The main roads are no longer simple highways, and the rear is no longer a quiet space for preparation. That is exactly the condition Ukraine wants to create before turning pressure into something more organized. A wider campaign to lock down the machinery that keeps Russian offensives alive. Ukraine's logistical lockdown may become a quiet form of counteroffensive before any major ground push begins. It does not need to start with tanks crossing open fields or infantry storming a town. It begins by weakening the system that allows Russia to keep attacking in the first place. This is why the movement of Russian depots matters. When supply sites, command posts, and rear facilities are pushed farther away from the front, they may become safer from immediate drone strikes, but they also become less useful to the soldiers who need them. Distance is not just space on a map. It is time, fuel, drivers, spare vehicles, and more exposure on the road. Every extra kilometer makes a delivery harder to protect. For Russia, that problem can spread quickly. A fuel depot placed deeper in the rear means tankers must travel longer routes before reaching forward units. An ammunition storage point moved farther away means artillery shells may take more time to arrive. A command post hidden at greater distance may be safer, but it can also create slower coordination with troops in active sectors. Protection improves in one area, but efficiency drops in another. That is the trade Ukraine is trying to force. The purpose of logistical lockdown is to turn that trade into a wider military problem. Ukraine is trying to expand its middle strike capability so it can hit Russian transport routes, storage points, supply vehicles, equipment, and command nodes at operational depth. In simple terms, Kyiv wants to make the rear area too dangerous for Russia to use freely. Not every target has to be large. A small logistics point can still matter if it sits in the right place at the right time. Ukraine has also put money behind this idea. Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine allocated an additional 5 billion hryvnia, about $112.3 million, to support medium-range strike capabilities. That kind of funding shows this is not only a battlefield improvisation, it is becoming a planned campaign. Ukraine is trying to produce, buy, and deploy more systems that can attack the layer between the front line and the deep rear. That layer is where many Russian units prepare before they fight. Mikhailo Fedorov said Ukraine had increased the destruction of Russian logistics, warehouses, equipment, command posts, and supply lines by 4 times through medium-range strikes. That statement is important because it shows the goal is not just to score individual hits. The aim is repetition. If strikes happen often enough, Russia must spend more effort protecting movement than preparing attacks. That changes the cost of every offensive action. This could affect Russia's ability to maintain offensive operations over time. An assault does not begin when infantry steps forward. It begins earlier, when shells are delivered, vehicles are repaired, fuel is moved, and soldiers are rotated into position. If those steps become slower or less reliable, the attack may still happen, but it may begin with less strength. That is how logistics pressure can shape the battlefield before the first shot of a new push is fired. Still, the final impact is not guaranteed. Russia can adapt. It can open alternate roads, divide convoys, increase electronic warfare, use decoys, and move more at night. Moscow has shown throughout the war that it can absorb heavy losses and keep fighting, but adaptation has a price. Every new route needs security. Every smaller convoy needs coordination. Every hidden depot needs a new delivery chain. That is why this campaign should be seen as an indirect counteroffensive. Ukraine may not immediately retake a major city through these strikes alone, but it can make Russia's war machine work harder, move slower, and spend more just to hold the same pressure. If that continues, the next battle may be decided before Russian assault troops even reach the front. Russia still has manpower, artillery, and several active directions on the front. But modern war is not decided only inside trenches. It is also decided on supply roads, near fuel points, around temporary depots, and inside the transport chain that keeps soldiers ready to fight. If those links become slower and more exposed, the front line begins to feel the pressure. This is why logistical lockdown could become a major part of Ukraine's strategy. Kyiv may not need to launch a classic counteroffensive immediately. It can first make Russian movement more difficult, force supplies to travel farther, and push commanders to spend more resources just keeping the machine running. Still, Russia can adapt with smaller convoys, camouflage, electronic warfare, and alternate routes. The real question is whether those changes can keep up with Ukraine's expanding drone reach. If this pressure continues, Russia's rear may become another front line. Subscribe to Military Force for more clear analysis on the weapons, battles, and geopolitical shocks shaping today's war, which was worth $13.65 million.